All right, welcome to the New Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Brotherton, author of the Seven Keys Saga, and with me tonight is author Marshall Edwards. Hi, Marshall. How are you doing? Did I lose you again already? And I'm pretty sure I just lost Marshall, so I'll go ahead and introduce him to you while he's trying to come back on. Marshall is the author of the Kung Fu space opera Yellow City, Red Star, and is one half of the creative team behind the superhero comic Prairie City Response. He also has a serial horror story called Mayfly, and he is going to be talking to us a little bit tonight about his process and his fiction. All right, it might be a little bit before Marshall's able to get on, so while I'm sitting here, let me give you guys a little bit of an update on what I'm working on, and I haven't recorded one yet this week. I'm actually recording this immediately. This interview is being recorded immediately after the night after the interview with Percival Constantine, which will be a week ago. Actually a week and a half ago by the time you listen to this on the audio feed, and was yesterday if you watch live on the YouTube channel. And that interview went really well. So I was really excited when I was able to just jump and do two back-to-back, and we'll be able to have a little bit of something in the can so I don't have to stress as much about talking on my own when I don't have an interview subject. And it looks like Marshall is starting to come back in, so I'm just going to keep ad-libbing. I haven't actually done a lot of writing this week. I've started outlining a little bit on my next project to take place. I finished Seven Keys 5 last week. I think I talked about that in the weekly update. It's with my beta reader and editor, and I am basically in the fluffy phase of I have all of these different ideas I could be working on, and my brain hasn't settled on which one it wants to work on yet. So, and welcome back, Marshall.
Hello.
I was just doing my weekly update to kind of fill in while you were disconnected.
Okay. Sounds good.
Most people who are podcast in the self-publishing kind of world are familiar with the Google Plus problem or Google Hangout problems. So,
fun. Awesome.
So, Marshall is the author. I've already said this, but I'll say it again just so Marshall is up to date with me or up to speed. Marshall is the author of the Kung Fu space opera Yellow City, Red Star, the serial horror story Mayfly, and he is one half of the creative team behind the superhero comic Prairie City Response.
That's correct. Yellow River, Red Star is not nearly out yet, but it's been a lot of fun putting together. I'd like to get back to that soon, but I actually, I'm fortunate enough that I was in one anthology this year, and I'm looking at being in two other anthologies. So that's pretty big for me. And that's all, this year has been sort of the year for that. So once all that is done with the short stories, then I'll kind of work on bigger things again. So.
And you are actually, before we forget, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later on too, but you are actually right now, this will go live on the audio broadcast on the 13th. So you're square in the very middle of your Kickstarter campaign for the second issue of Prairie City Response.
That's correct. Yes, I really appreciate you helping me, inviting me on and helping me get the word out there. Yeah, it's going to be a good campaign. We have a really great script. The first issue was good, but it's the very first thing I ever published, and so of course, like any good writer, I looked at it and I'm just like, wow, I want to do this, I want to do this better, I want to tighten this up, and it all kind of came together. Issue 2 is really fantastic, and not too ambitious. I got all the things that I wanted to improve in there, so I'm pretty happy with that. And yeah, we are. Eric is back on board for this one. His stuff is looking a lot better. We have a very consistent look for Prairie City now, and we're going to have a great colorist come in too, like we did on the first issue. So it's looking good. We just got to keep trucking with the fundraiser. So
I'm pretty excited. My first issue is actually hanging behind my computer. It's framed.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I will probably be donating next Wednesday when I get paid. So just so you know.
All right.
Hopefully you'll already be funded then, and you'll be on boost goals and all that stuff.
Oh sure, yeah, of course. And it's like, oh yes, Matt. Yes, Matt put his money in. That's nice. That's good. Yes. No, it's going to be good. You know, we do have a higher goal than last time because everyone's working professionally full time now. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal, but it's going to be good. So I didn't know you had it framed. I definitely want a picture of that. That would be really cool to see.
All right, I'll see if I can get you one.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, which is everybody watching this probably, Marshall and I have actually known each other for a very long time.
Yeah.
10 years-ish now.
Holy shit. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Getting there.
Yeah, it is. Damn.
We met actually through the co-host of my former podcast, the Half Drunk Podcast, which is Chris. And you and Chris actually have another project also on the side that you guys work on, right?
We did for a while, and it was hard to just hard to keep up. It was a fun concept, but it was because we weren't we weren't experienced enough, we weren't quite dedicated enough, so it didn't keep up like it should have. But I would like to do something with it eventually. Right now I'm focusing on paying projects and things like that, which I'm happy to be able to focus on paying projects. So,
yeah.
One day eventually, it was fun. It was an alternate universe. Basically the premise was that magic was real in this universe, and there's this famous test in real history that Benjamin Franklin was part of it and a few other people, but they were testing to see if mesmerism was true or false, and they were applying science to it. And of course they found out that it's false, but in this alternate reality, it turns out that it's true, and then it very quickly changes the course of world events. So it was a lot of fun. It's just, it was it was a huge scale project that we were, didn't have a good idea of what the scope was going to be. And so that is a big sticking point on that one. So.
And trust me, I am well aware of how big project creep can happen when you're working with Chris.
I would love to blame him, but I was like, I want to do a whole different universe, and it's like, where do we start? I'm like, I don't know, just start writing things. So, that probably didn't help either.
Actually, the Alcohologist comic, or the Alcohologist Chronicles books, kind of came out the same way, because we had all of the scripts for the comics that never were. And we were like, let's turn these scripts into stories since we can't find a consistent artist. And then we threw them all away the moment we actually started writing anything.
Oh wow. Oh, man.
Yeah, so we had just pages and pages and pages of scripts, and none of those stories made it into the actual serial.
Oh, geez. Man, that is hard, but I did go through that with Prairie City also. I just, and my artist at the time was just like, man, you don't have to throw these out. These are perfectly fine. I'm like, it's not good enough anymore. When you're first starting out, you're a year or two can make a huge difference. And just like, this is totally not what I want to write anymore. I want to, totally redo this.
I was actually talking to someone today about the taste curve, which is when, as a writer, your taste develops to the point where you can recognize good writing, but your skill isn't necessarily there, so you think everything you write sucks. I say it's a really important step in the writing process. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm actually on the back end of that in some ways now, because I was going to go back to my first book and create an audiobook.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't ever want to read this again. This is horrible.
Oh no. Wait, yeah, your series is pretty ambitious. Is that what you're talking about, the first book in that series, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha. I still need to catch up on that, but I know how that goes for sure.
It's just hard to go back.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things. When you brought up Yellow River Red Star early on, I was like, oh no, because I'm still trying to revamp a lot of that. I'm really proud of the story, but my writing was very florid and very. I just don't write like that anymore. I really try to get to the point because that's what I like to read when I read.
Have you ever? Are you at that place where you just need to scrap everything that you've written and just completely redraft?
God, I really hope not. Not for that one. I don't want to because, um, I think I could gut the scenes maybe, but I worked really hard to get a first book almost of it, sort of divided into three because I was having a hard time getting it finished. And that was a couple years ago, but anyway, I still feel like I'm close. I feel like I could drag that up and redo the writing and all that. And I know that some of it isn't as bad as I remember. I mean, as bad as other parts of it. So I'm really hesitant to throw it all out, but at the same time, it's hard to go back and edit my own stuff. So I'm having my wife Tegan look at it. She's pretty critical and doesn't hold back as an editor. So she's just like, that's crap. No, please rewrite that. So.
I think there are a lot of times like because I do like 3 or 4 drafts of a book.
Okay.
But I can't. Actually, this is the same reason I can't follow an outline. When I'm writing a draft, if that draft isn't working, I can't. Like there will be phrases and things that I might be able to save from it, but it is actually faster and easier for me to just start completely over and redraft.
Right. I see. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go when I start writing bigger stories again, but for short stories, which is kind of my focus, like I said, this year I've got 3 stories going into anthologies, so I kind of have to think this way. I will get a scene in my head and I'll get where I can see it. And instead of when I was doing NaNoWriMo, that Yellow River Red Star was going to be a NaNoWriMo, National Write a Novel in a Month thing. And basically, that's all based on word count. You want to just keep on writing, and you'll hit something that's good. And I guess that's kind of the theory. But it was so painful for me to go back and edit that. The way I write now is I'll kind of formulate it in my head, see what the scene is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like, and then if I don't have the time or the right frame of mind to actually get that scene written, I'll write down one thing that one person says, or I'm like, that really ties the scene together, and then I will, and then I'll expand on that when I have time and just make sure all those moments kind of connect together the right way, and then I don't have to do multiple drafts that way. It's kind of one continuous draft, but so it's built around those key points.
So do you outline or?
I don't. While I readjust my sitting position, generally no. I like to be surprised, as surprised as anybody else. So I will kind of outline as I go along, but I can only think. It works best when I think a few scenes ahead. I might have a general arc sort of in mind, but I don't know. Another way to put that is that I do believe in planning, but you have to be able to just let go of that plan as soon as it doesn't work anymore, or you're going to have a lot of anguish, and that. If it's not fun, it's going to be 10 times as hard to do, and finishing works, getting something actually done is such a huge confidence booster that it's kind of essential. That's my, I I was at a convention recently, and somebody came up to me and was like, "How do you, develop a style? How do you get something done?" And we talked about it for a little bit, and then I just said, it sounds like you have a lot to figure out, a lot to discover about how you want to write. So the best thing you can do is just get one thing completely done. Even if you hate it, you can at least do better next time because there was a time. If there's no first time, you can't really improve. So.
Yeah, and once you have that first one done, you're like...
Don't know if I lost the thread of the conversation. But
once you have the first one done, too, you're going to go, well, I've done this before. I can do this again. When you get into the weeds on the second one or the fifth one or the 30th one, I assume.
Right, I assume. I wouldn't know yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
See, I can't do an outline at all. And I've actually found I was trying very hard to learn to do outlining. I'm still trying to put an outline together for every project before I start it. What I've learned about myself is if I know how the story is going to end, I don't want to write it anymore. Yeah. So I have to completely abandon anything. There is no planning at all. If I get stuck in a spot, I go out and do a drive around, and when I come back, I usually have the answer. And so everything has to be completely pantsed. And I think I'm going to push that now. I'm a complete pants writer.
I really think that it's a good way to go not for everybody, but if it works for you, there's no reason to make yourself do an outline. But I'm kind of like you. I want to be excited, and I want to be surprised, and I think that's what readers like too. They want that. I use a lot of visuals and a lot of pacing things to keep myself interested, to build tension, to change things up, and that's all. And that is a very sequential sort of thing. It's hard to plan that out as you go, because once you get to that moment, then you kind of know that moment in the writing. That's sort of when you're not there yet, it's hard to know what you need next. So.
And is it different for you for comics versus writing prose?
Well, I think so. I think writing comics helped me think in episodes, which kind of helped me do short stories. But comics are, the standard is 24 pages, so how long it's going to be, how much you want to get into the issue, and you'll be surprised how much you can put into a page or two, even without a whole lot of dialogue or anything, if you really want to and really want to make it good. And so there's a different sort of pressure there. I'm a visual writer anyways, even when I'm doing short stories. So when I'm doing comics, I'm usually aware of when I need to. I try to be aware of when I'm crowding too much or trying to do too much at once, and when I need to give the audience a chance to digest with a larger image or maybe a splash page to sort of let things sink in. So that is one advantage of writing comics. So in a way, it's different, especially when you have a story arc. Prairie City Response has a 4-issue arc, and a hell of a lot goes into those 4 issues with world building and character development, and you want to hit the notes at the right time in the right order, and you have that whole mechanism in serial comics where you have to have that hook, or you want to have that hook that drives people to the next issue. So it is different. It is different, but it's not a bad difference.
Do you think you've learned more about story structuring from doing the comics?
Yes and no. I'm trying to think. It's hard to say because I started with the comics. That was the very first Prairie City response #1 is the very first thing I ever wrote and published. So I did learn a lot. I learned a lot from that experience. One is that no matter how good something sounds on like a piece of dialogue or something, no matter how good it sounds on paper, you're still going to have to cram it onto a page with a whole bunch of scenery and people acting and stuff. So it's good to know when to make your character shut up or say something very succinctly. So that's what I did with issue 2. Issue 1 gets a little word heavy, but yeah, you learn how much. That is one thing that I like in writing in general, is that if you're doing it right, or if you're doing it skillfully, then you can say a whole bunch without using a lot of words or a lot of description. You can get to the heart of the matter. You can bring the right impression or emotion home to the reader without bombarding them with the moral or with whatever, or the exposition. I really tried to cut down on exposition because I know that it takes me right out of comics when I'm reading comics. As like Alan Moore is a very popular guy, but he is very, very text heavy. And so I just can't do it. It's like, just put it in a book. I mean, I'm not going to read that book because that book is also too wordy, but I'm going to let the action speak, let the character's actions.
I think I just lost Marshall again. We will see if he is able to get back in, and it's weird to me that Marshall would be dropping out considering he lives in a fiber hood. So you would think his Google connection would be better, but that just goes to show you that you can't trust Google for anything at all. In the meantime, I'm actually going to build on a little point he just was saying for those of you at home is...
Hey,
you're back.
I might be back. I think I might be back.
Yeah, I was just, filling. I was complaining about how the fact that you live in a fiber hood, so you would think your Google Hangout would work better.
You would think so. You'd think there'd be some sort of legal or illegal preferential treatment sort of thing going on, but who even knows? But yes, it's wonderful. Short plug for Google. Please back my book. But there's sometimes random slowdowns, but it's still better than anything else we've ever had. And we haven't paid for the professional. If we paid for the professional and I kept getting dropped like this, I'd be a little frustrated. So
I was actually getting ready to say, when I write fantasy, I write in the fantasy genre. And most fantasy books are huge, giant, epic, door-stopping tomes because they feel the need to spend 30 or 40 pages on a door frame, for example. Right. And then 2 pages on a battle involving 25,000 orcs. And I don't do that. And my books are only like 35,000 words. And I think it's the same, like... basic concept is you don't need to over describe scenery. Yeah,
you really don't. You need to know how it's impacting the character. And actually, there's a really great example of this. I'm sure you know who William Gibson is. And have you read his Blue Ant series?
No, I have not actually read anything by William Gibson.
That's fine. That's not really central to it. His Blue Ant series is set in the modern day. It's sort of almost a corporate espionage trilogy. There's one book of it called Zero History. Yeah, Zero History. And in Zero History, there are a few main characters, and they end up at the same places and going through the same things a lot of the time. But because they have such widely diverse outlooks, they experience those places so very differently. So you're not being beat over the head with exposition about this place, you're being brought there once, and then you're being brought there again, and totally different things are being brought out. And he's able to do that. You know, it lets you know what's important to the character, and it doesn't beat you over the head with, wow, I'm doing this awesome, great thing with the scenery. You know, it's not in a self-referential or self-important sort of way. So if you want to learn how to manage scenery well, I would suggest that to watchers is William Gibson's Blue Ant series.
I read a book this winter called Shoot Your Novel, and it's about looking at your scenes and settings and everything as if you were the director of a movie, angling cameras. And it's like there's no time for wasted scenery in a film. So everything you describe is the camera is looking at it, and if it doesn't mean anything, then it's a waste of film.
Yeah, I understand that from writing a comic. I mean, you have a precious amount of space. You don't have a lot of time to bullshit or let scenery eat up the camera. You want to get the heart of the matter, and the better, you know, I think it carries over to film and animation and things like that. You look at, there's you know, new animation format is 11 minutes for an episode a lot of the time. But you'll look at different shows and just, you know, look at these very diverse shows and see how much they can cram into 11 minutes. Some of them do a masterful job of putting a lot of information because they're using visuals, they're using idle, quote unquote, idle conversation to reflect back on the characters and the way they, who they are and what their values are. So, yeah, when you have any sort of visual element, you can't waste a lot of time. And I think that's where a lot of writers get hung up, is because since they have more time, I mean, you know, there's this illusion of having more time when you're writing to go into people, you know, the way people look and the crevices on their face, and that, you know, they have a mole over here. But if it doesn't affect the story, it doesn't need to be there, and you could be using that time to do something more central to who that character is or what the conflict is. So it's the same principle, I think.
I'm also a big fan of the rule of three in writing. With human brains respond well to sets of three.
Oh, okay.
So when you're describing a character or a place, you get 3 details, and that's it. And you can use less, but people respond to 3. So you should, you know, if you're describing a character, you have to describe everything you want to convey about that character to your audience, to your readers, with the 3 details you choose. So you have to choose very well, and you have to make sure those 3 things mean something, because those are the only 3 details anyone's going to remember about the character.
Right. And that's really interesting. I like that. I like that idea. I don't know if it's one I didn't know that's what that meant, because I hear that before, but I didn't realize that's what that was.
Well,
that's pretty cool.
I say the rule of 3 applies to a lot of things, because the human brain just is programmed to like things that come in 3s. I don't know why.
Interesting. It's really interesting. Well, I do. Yeah, I do think that you know, that the actions of a character. You want to, and it sounds impossible when you're first starting to write, but you want to have someone's action or response to a situation be something that no other character would react that way. You know, that it's very, very that character. And I think a lot of the time people fall into a very generic, you know, maybe it's a genre fiction thing, but when I was a kid, there was a lot of stuff that I just couldn't get into because the character was was so generic. It didn't feel distinct what they were doing. And I think a lot of fiction that's aimed at kids especially is that way. So I ended up not reading a whole lot. but yeah, if you, yeah, to link that back to the rule of three, you know, skimp on the actual, this is what it looks like, what this person looks like, this is the way they are. Do what you have to with that, and then make them respond to things. You know, make them take action or reaction, and have that tell your audience who they are. And that's my advice, is just, you know, show me. Don't tell me, show me.
And you get an entire book to do that with your protagonists. But when you still need, one of those things that I every time I introduce a character to us in the story, that character has a background for me. Sometimes it's made up right then as I'm typing, but I know the things that need to be true. And every character is going to have at least 3 things in their background that may or may not come up in the story.
That is good to know. I mean, you're going, that's if it's real to you, it doesn't matter how minor a character is. If you know who it is, then you know you're some of that personality is still going to come out, which is it can be a little disappointing, I think, if you're a beginner, when and you kind of figure that out, because it's like, I'm doing all this work and no one's going to see it. Well, they shouldn't have to. There are people who try to do that, and I hate, I always hate on Tolkien, but he does seem to do a lot of that. It's like, well, this is who these people are, and blah blah blah. Here's a lot of backstory, and here's a lot of description, and it's like, well, that wasn't totally essential to the action. So
I think for me, it comes from running role-playing games for so long. So it's not so much that this is ever going to be relevant. It's my characters are my players, and they might do something I'm completely unexpected for, and I need to have this thing in my back pocket that I can pull out if that comes up.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think, maybe it's from my experience with role-playing games too, that emergent story where it's not totally outlined. It's exciting. You want your story to be an adventure and have interesting things happen, and why not have some of that fun for yourself as the writer? Why not just say, well, I don't know exactly what's around the corner. Let's change. Let's do something totally different than what I thought was going to happen. Let's take a detour, and that'll end up more meaningful than what you had originally planned. So.
The only downside to that is when you are running a game, you can distract people with things until you figure stuff out.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you can just throw out BS and let your players pick up on it, and there you go. You've got past the block in the story, but
right. Yeah, can't really do that so much when you're writing. You have to.
For some reason, readers expect your story to make sense. You can't just be like, Devil Bunny.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, I mean, geez. Oh, readers.
You would think when we're writing something like Alcohologist Chronicles, if I just stopped the story and was like, now there's a Devil Bunny, the type of people who should be reading Alcohologist Chronicles would be like, dude, that makes total sense. But the actual first review we got was like, this is nonsensical.
Nice. I mean, not nice, but
the cover has a penis ship on it.
Yes, I demand a cohesive narrative to this penis ship saga. But at the same time, man, I'm relying on an old trope, but they say that Picasso was able to break the laws of art because he knew what they were. So you have to be really, really good for you to use something like absurdity, and tell a compelling, good story. There are, it's like there's parody artists out there for, who do music videos online and stuff, and they're terrible on purpose. But you can tell that they're really good because they know how to be terrible.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So yeah, that I know what you mean, but it's not it. Using those devices, you still got to know how to use them well and get a good response. So, yeah.
All right, Marshall, we're coming up well past our half-hour mark.
Okay. Well,
and I haven't actually eaten dinner yet, so
ah,
we should do this again, though, because it's been a long time since we had a chance to talk, and this was a lot of fun.
I'm having fun too. We should do this again. So, I guess, yeah. Should I plug my thing again, or do you want to plug the thing again?
Yeah,
or...
why don't you go ahead and tell us everywhere you are, or whatever you want people to do.
Okay. I'm on Twitter at Prairie City Post, and I'm also on Facebook as Prairie City Post. Prairie City Response is the comic book series. It's about 3 superheroes that are defending a city that's full of off-world refugees who are fleeing an interstellar empire. And basically, it's a modern twist on superheroes where, you know, there's not a lot of spandex. There's it's kind of like being a celebrity in the modern day, where everything they do is put under a microscope and criticized by the public. So, you know, they have a PR angle where they have to, you know, do damage control and that type of thing. So it's I wanted to just do, you know, if superheroes existed in the real world, what would the feedback be? What would, you know, but, you know, despite all that, that sounds very high concept and dry, but there's a lot of punching people in the face and, you know, fights above the city and all this stuff. So it's, you know, I'm trying, you know, the action's good. I think the main characters are good and compelling. So check it out. And it's on Kickstarter right now. If you search for Prairie City Response Issue 2, it should pop up. There'll be a blue-skinned guy with a badge around his neck, and that's how you know you're there.
And I'll make sure to link to Prairie City Response on Kickstarter in the show notes, as well as to your blog on marshalledwards.net.
Yes. Yeah, the blog is definitely still there. It just haven't updated it as much, but that's my fault. So. And
your YouTube channel.
Yes, I'm doing more of those. So that is good. Do that, please.
All right. Well, thank you for being on. This was great. We definitely need to do it again. Thanks, everybody at home, for watching. Go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're on iTunes and you're listening to this, we would love to have a review. And you can swing over to newwriterpodcast.com to get the show notes and more information. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you.